Intimacy. It's such a huge part of being human, but at the same time, it's often surrounded by myths and just a lot of confusion. So today, we're going to pull back the curtain and use real science to understand what's actually happening in those moments of connection. Let's dive in. So let's start with this question, because I bet it's on a lot of our minds. What is really going on? Not just what we see in movies, but what's happening inside our bodies, inside our minds. It's a natural thing to be curious about, but finding straight answers can be tough. Well, today, we're going to change that by looking at the actual facts. Here's the game plan for how we'll break it all down. First, we're going to bring this conversation out into the open. Then, we'll get right into the science of that very first touch and what happens after. We're also going to tackle the big topic of pain and fear head on. After that, we'll explore that amazing link between body and mind. And finally, wrap it all up to find out what really makes intimacy a positive experience. All right, first things first, we have to bring this topic out from behind closed doors. For way too long, it's been a subject of whispers and assumptions. Our goal here is pretty simple, to replace all that with clear, factual understanding. And this quote from our source material really says it all, doesn't it? The whole idea is that knowledge is power. When you have the right information, all that fear and confusion that can surround intimacy, it starts to fade away. It gets replaced with confidence and real understanding. Okay, so let's put that idea into practice right now. We're going to start with the biology of the very first touch. On a purely scientific level, what is actually going on in those first few moments? So 3 key things happen pretty much instantly. The first is a feeling of warmth, which makes sense because the body's internal temperature is just naturally a little bit higher. That's followed by what our source calls a velvety pressure, as the vagina's muscular, flexible walls create this gentle, surrounding hug. And here's the really amazing part. That physical pressure helps kick off a hormonal chain reaction of pleasure, triggering feel-good chemicals like dopamine and oxytocin in the brain. Now, what's so fascinating is how this one physical moment can be felt so differently. From the male perspective, it's often described just like that, a warm hug, focusing on that simple warmth and pressure. But for women, the sensation is way more complex, and it's totally dependent on how aroused she is. It can feel like anything from a sense of fullness to a gentle stretch, which just goes to show how crucial it is for her body to be fully ready. And that readiness brings us to a really important biological process, natural lubrication. This is basically the body's brilliant, built-in response to arousal. It creates a fluid that cuts down on friction, making everything smoother, more comfortable, and more pleasurable. This isn't just a minor detail. It's an absolutely essential ingredient for a positive connection for both partners. Okay, so we've covered the initial touch, but what about as intimacy progresses? Let's explore the sensations that happen when things go a little deeper. Let's start with a little anatomy fact that might surprise you. At rest, the vaginal canal is typically about 3 to 5 inches long. But, and this is a big but, that's not the whole story. The key thing here is its incredible elasticity. It's literally designed to lengthen and expand, especially during arousal. So as intimacy progresses, deeper penetration might stimulate the cervix. And here's the thing about that sensation. It is incredibly individual. For some women, it can be really, really pleasant. For others, it might feel uncomfortable. And that's a perfect reminder that there is no single right way for this to feel. It all depends on your unique body and that specific moment. This brings us to a really important and often feared topic, pain. Honestly, it's one of the biggest concerns people have, so we're going to tackle it directly with clear scientific facts. So let's just ask the question that so many people are afraid to. Is this supposed to hurt? It's a very real fear, and it can prevent people from being able to relax. So let's get to the truth. Well, the answer really comes down to the powerful connection between our mind and our muscles. Think about it. When you feel relaxed and ready, your pelvic muscles are also relaxed, which allows for a smooth, painless experience. But if you're feeling scared or anxious, those same muscles tighten up without you even telling them to. And that contraction is what can create resistance and, yes, pain. It's a direct physical reflection of your mental state. In fact, this involuntary muscle tensing has a medical name, vaginismus. It is so important to understand that this is not a conscious choice. It's the body's automatic defense response to fear or anxiety. Giving it a name helps us see it for what it is, a physical symptom, and separates it from any feeling of personal failure. So, you see, this mind-body connection proves that intimacy is so much more than just a physical act. It's this incredible, complex dance between our nerves, our hormones, and our emotions. Let's explore that union a little more. Okay, so as movement happens, the friction stimulates this amazing network of super-sensitive nerves. These nerves then shoot signals up to the brain, which we interpret as waves of pleasure. The source material even describes this sensation as feeling like a gentle electric current running through you, a moment that can feel totally absorbing. But here's the thing. that sensation isn't always the same. It can feel completely different depending on what else is going on in your body. For instance, sensitivity is often much higher during ovulation, thanks to increased blood flow. On the flip side, being really stressed can actually dull sensation. It's this constant dynamic feedback loop. And understanding this real, changing nature of intimacy is so important because it's the complete opposite of what a lot of misinformation shows us. This quote from our source says it perfectly. Trying to form your idea of what sex is like from watching porn is, well, it's just completely wrong. It sets us all up for failure and confusion. Let's just look at the difference side by side. Porn often shows intimacy that's fast, maybe aggressive, and focused only on the physical act. But real intimacy is responsive, it's personal, it connects us emotionally. The sensations aren't some over-the-top performance. They're delicate, warm, and totally unique to the person. And maybe the biggest difference of all, communication. In porn, it's basically assumed or doesn't exist. In real life, it is absolutely essential for comfort and pleasure. So, after busting some myths and understanding the science, what is the actual secret to a truly pleasurable experience? This final section pulls together all the most important takeaways. So, what's the big secret? It's that the physical act is only part of the equation. True, deep pleasure really comes from feeling completely connected with your partner. It's built on a foundation of trust, and it allows for a moment where you can just surrender, both physically and emotionally.
So, how do we build that connection? It really comes down to these simple but crucial keys. Taking plenty of time for foreplay, not rushing the experience, making sure the body is physically ready and comfortable, talking openly and honestly, and maybe most importantly, respecting your body and your partner's body. These are the real building blocks.
And so we'll end with a final question for you to think about. We've gone through the science, the psychology, but in the end, intimacy is deeply personal. So beyond just the physical act, what does this experience truly mean to you? Thanks for joining us for this explainer.